I don't know if you've seen this. You've probably seen this cartoon, the first two slides, a lot. This is fine, everything's fine. But the full cartoon that this guy did continued on. This little dog sitting in this burning room. He said, it's okay. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently. He continues to drink his coffee. And he says, that's okay. Things are going to be okay. And he's melting to death there. And I don't know if you feel like this little dog does sometimes, but I try to stay away from the news as much as possible. The dumb Olympics have got me seeing live TV again, and I'm like, no, I don't want to see the news because, wow, I mean, it is like a dumpster fire right now in our world. I mean, it's just crazy. And like, I try to stay off, like I've disconnected from as much social media as possible because I feel like ignorance is bliss a little bit sometimes, and I just don't want to be in the crazy anymore. And they keep sucking me, they keep drawing me back in. And do you feel like that? Like we're on this roller coaster right now, and it's just wild and wilder? I mean, I grew up in the 80s mainly. I mean, I'm a 70s kid. I was born in 78, but like, I don't remember the 70s. I remember the 80s, right, and the 90s. That's my milieu. That's what I remember. And I guess I thought things were kind of on this track, and we were getting better and stronger and more unified, and then you look at the dumpster fire today, and you're just like, what is happening in our world? This doesn't even matter what side of the spectrum you are on. You can look at it and go, wow, we have got some major problems. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like maybe, yeah? Does it scare you a little bit? It's a little scary. I mean, it's a little worrisome. It's a lot worrisome. Yeah. And people get stressed out, and they're screaming at each other, and they're yelling at each other, and you see these images of people in public, or maybe they're on social media, or they're at a rally, and they're just, yeah, and you're just like, goodness, that's not healthy. I mean, we can look at that and go, that's not healthy, and it's why people used to watch Judge Judy, so you would see that kind of stuff happen, and now it's happening on live television. And so I, for one, have watched and continue to watch that kind of just unraveling around us in our mess, and see the negativity and see the weight of all these things and continue to long for a way out, a solution. And I got to be honest with you, I'm pretty pessimistic that we are going to come up with any sort of solution. Again, this is not the world I thought I was going to raise my kids in. I thought we were headed to better things. I mean, technology was increasing, and I come from the analog age. We used cassette tapes, and in my home, there was a wall phone. It hung on the wall, and you picked it up, and you got a dial tone, and you did this at first. Like, I remember that technology. I had a party line, for goodness sakes. And so to see that throughout my high school years, modems became a thing, and then the internet, and then technology that was in my pocket, which is almost unthinkable when I was a kid. So I've seen a lot of change in technology, and I thought at the same time, socially and ethically, we were going to improve, becoming more humane towards one another, and that is not what has been my experience. And so something inside of me, I have a hunger for this, maybe you do too, something inside of me wants to see things get better, would do almost anything to see good proliferate in our world. And yet, at a core level, I am pessimistic about that. Because I know that the only good that really is out there for this world, the only solution that is really possible, is going to come from Jesus. And so, I want to talk about that. Today we're going to continue this talk. We're going to talk about 3 themes that I believe can do just that. I don't believe these 3 actions are so practical that they're like magic that we can sprinkle on our culture and fix everything. But I believe it's the only thing we have in our toolbox. I believe it is something we can do to put good into our world. So don't see it as I've come up with a magic solution or the magic bullet to fix everything. I have not. But these are 3 things that are given to us in the Bible as practical actions of how, in a treacherous world, we can bring light. We can be like that lighthouse. And if you study history very much, you see that the disciples were doing these things, and they were doing them in a culture that was really bad. I mean, they probably felt the same way. Very pagan, very against the things of God, very much anti-Christ. And yet, they walked into that darkness, and they brought the light with them. I don't have any vision that we are much different than them, that our pessimism is likely aligned with theirs, that we wished, as they did, for a more humane society. But here's how we can begin that process. We're going to look first in Matthew in just a moment, as we look at a story that Jesus tells. It's a parable that he tells in order to help illustrate that we have things to do right now. Sometimes we think about how terrible it is right now, and we focus only on the very far future, like the return of Christ. And I know that's true because they were doing that back in Jesus' day, and we continue to have that struggle today, where we almost hopscotch over all of human history in between Acts 1:8, where we stopped last Sunday, Jesus going to be with the Father, and the end of time in Revelation. There's a whole lot of living in the in-between period there. And so what do we do in that in-between period? Well, Jesus tells this parable about three people that he gives, and this master gives three to his employees. He gives these three amounts of money to them. And he says, I'm going to go away on a trip, and I'll be back and see what you've done with it. And he comes back, and it's when he comes back that he has a conversation with each of them about what they did with what they were given. And that directly relates to, Jesus was trying to help them get it and help us get it. That directly relates to how Jesus would leave them and give them each a different amount of talent. I mean, clearly not all of them were gifted in the same way. Everybody had a different kind of talent, different skill. But there's a time of reckoning coming back when the boss comes back and says, what did you do with what you were entrusted with? Not compare yourself to everybody else, but what did you do with what I gave you? That's the question that Jesus really gets at. And he kind of brings out this idea that we can't be like that dog in the cartoon and bury our head in the sand. That's not healthy to spiritually ignore it. Whether you take the role of the hermit who goes and tries to just ignore the whole world, like I try to do sometimes, and just try to la 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 la, I can't hear you, I don't want to know. Or you take the role of someone who just kind of obliviously walks through life and tries to ignore it. Either one of those is not healthy. Instead, engagement at what we've been put in front of is healthy. So that's the question, though, isn't it? That's always the question. What is the line there? What does that look like? And I'm going to give you three broad categories today of ways I think you can invest in right here in our community. So I think, as with anything, I think investments of time and talent and treasure that we make locally, we visualize a lot more clearly. I don't know if you feel that way about when tax season rolls around, but I feel that way about when tax season rolls around. I have no clue what my federal taxes are doing most of the time, but I can see roads, I can see libraries, I can see the school, I can see the fire department, I can see Francis Tuttle, and so that, like, to me, somehow that connects with me a lot better than, like, federal kind of nether. And so I get a sense of that. I feel those things much more closely because I can go to the library. When I have an emergency, I call the fire department, and, I use the roads to go to work and to go to church and to go to the grocery store. So I really feel those in a lot more sense. And I've always felt like that. We talked about primacy last Sunday of your time, of, giving while you're living and not waiting, deferring till later. Well, again, we're going to see not deferring until later for some radical future we think might exist, but instead being present in the moment and using our talents wisely. So Matthew 25 is where we're going to start today. And this is, your Bible may call it the parable of the talents. I'm going to be reading to you from, I believe, New Living Translation. And this one calls it the parable of the three servants. And I like that better because I think the other language is a little bit weird for us. NIV specifically talks about their money as gold, but NLT translates it as bags of silver. So just understand it's a form of currency of some kind, and that would have been currency coin in this story that Jesus is telling. So here is the beginning of this. It says, again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. And then he left on his trip. So first of all, he has 3 people that work for him. He's given them different amounts of money because each of them have displayed different levels of trustworthiness, different levels of proficiency with it. So he doesn't give them the same amount. It's not fair. First and foremost, we learn life's not fair. I like to sing, but I don't sing well. So I don't have a gift for that, okay? And I try to stay away from most people when I'm singing. I try to sit by myself, right? Because I don't want everybody to be, oh my goodness, what is he doing? So it's not fair. I did not get Michael Bublé's voice. I didn't get a good voice, all right? But I do what I can with it. And so you may feel like, okay, I don't have a lot of talent in certain areas. I'm jealous of someone else's talent. That's not what this is about. Jesus is teaching clearly here. We all get different amounts. But it's not about that. We continue, verse 16. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money, and he earned 5 more. He doubled it. The servant with the 2 bags of silver went to work and earned 2 more, also doubling it. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver, now already we know something about him. He received the less amount, so he has already not shown great ability. But the one who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they'd used his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more. Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 5 more. The master was full of praise. Now listen to what the guy says. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. The servant who'd received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I've earned 2 more. The master said, well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. What's important to note there is the praise is the exact same. Doesn't change. 1 earned 5, 1 earned 2. The amount was not important. It was what they did with what they'd been entrusted, and the praise was the exact same. Now, unfortunately, verse 24 says, when the servant with the 1 bag of silver came, he said, Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid you would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here is your money back. Now, to the audience, to Jesus' audience here, a gasp would have gone out in the room when he said that. For a servant to say that to the master is pretty close to cultural blasphemy. It's pretty close to cursing someone. To call out the master, you are a harsh man. You harvest where you didn't plant. Woo. I mean, it's very insulting. The master replies, pretty much equally insulting back. You wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it. Then he ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one with 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this useless servant to the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. We get super frightened at that imagery. And I always bring up that we do that often. I watched the Olympics the other day, and I saw some gymnast fall really bad, and I was like, ugh. You know what that is? That's gnashing of teeth. I didn't weep. I don't weep much. But I gnashed my teeth. I go, oh, that looks like that is painful. I remember watching a basketball game where a guy popped his ankle out of socket, and I was like, There was a little gnashing of teeth, but there was a little bit of, ugh. Right? You've seen things like that. You know what that feels like. You mess something up, though. I don't know if you've ever messed something really bad up on the computer, like you're working on something all day and you forget to save and electricity hits, and before we had autosave, and you're like, oh, lots of gnashing of teeth. You miss a goal at the state basketball game that you're counted on, you can gnash your teeth. Notice the master in this story does not commend them for the amount they earn, but instead for their faithfulness. Well done, my good and faithful servant. They've been good stewards of what they've been given. It's not about how much they have, but what they do with what they've been given. And so, bottom line is, true wealth isn't measured by what we possess, but by how we use what we have. Whether you're talking about your bank account, you're talking about your talents, what you've been given, how maybe you are a good singer, not unlike me. Maybe you're a speaker. Maybe you're an organizer. Maybe you're a leader. Maybe you're someone that others look up to for direction. Maybe you have a technical skill set of some time with computers or with mechanics. Whatever it is, whatever you've been entrusted with, what do you do with that? Fear and inaction are what caused the master to call this other servant lazy and wicked. And so what we see here is a definite, strong warning in Jesus' teaching about complacency, about sitting back, about waiting, and about doing nothing with what God has entrusted us with. Doing nothing is really not a very, very good option because that's where you get called out. We're in that in-between period where the master has gone away on his trip, and we are been entrusted right now. And so we have an opportunity right now to do something with that. And you see some people are very good about doing this right now. They're very much about, how can I make this world a better place? How can we get the message out to people? How can we work with people? How can we minister to people? How can we help? But we also see the others. We see the Ebenezer Scrooges, right? We see them hoarding and holding back. And only one of those responses is faithful. Only one of those responses is valid according to Jesus' teaching here. Jesus' very plain teaching in this parable. It's not complicated. Parables, in fact, are intended to take concepts that are kind of difficult to understand and to put those cookies on the shelf where we can all access it. He wants all of us to get this point very clearly. That there are practical things we can do in the time we've been given. None of us knows how much time we have left. But in that time, whatever it is, between this moment you're breathing and whenever your final breath is taken, you have margin. You have opportunity. And that's what we want to focus on. What do we do with that time? Because that's all we have at our disposal. We can't change the past. There's little we can do to change the outcomes of the future. But in the moment right now, we can be faithful. So, I want to talk about 3 practical investments you can do in what I think is one of the greatest organizations that have ever been created, and that's because Jesus gave it to us. He told them he was leaving this church, he was giving the Holy Spirit to them. They were not going to be alone. And that as the church was started, it would be there to be this beacon of light all across the globe, that it would continue to expand and continue to take his message. The first thing you can do is very simple, is to pray. And I want to talk about the priority of prayer and why I put it first. I believe that everything comes out of this. This is where it all starts, our communication. And I don't want you to think of prayer as something we just do at church. Prayer is something that can be done at home. It can be done by yourself. It can be done with others, like the prayer walk. It can be done in public. There's a lot of different opportunities for praying. But like going on a big road trip, what do you check when you're going on a big road trip? Well, obviously you check the tires, make sure they've got air, but you're going to make sure you have gas, right? Because you don't want to get 5 miles out of town and have the car just stop on you completely. When we don't pray first, it's like setting off on a road trip without filling the tank. We are empty. And to be filled spiritually and to be ready, we must pray. We must talk to God. So we're sitting on E when we don't begin with prayer. And we can have all the good strategies we want. We can have all the good plans we want. We can think things through. We can be really smart people. We can be great leaders at work. And we can be great organizers. And we head out. But we head out without prayer, it is destined for failure because the tank is empty. Instead, we need to start in prayer. God, where would you have me go? God, what opportunities should I say yes to? What should I say no to? And we can talk conversationally with God. It doesn't have to be a formal prayer. We can talk just like we're having a conversation with anyone in our life. God wants to hear from his people. But unfortunately, most of the time we get it confused and we think God needs us to be ingenious. God needs us to invent something. He needs a light bulb, a eureka moment, and then we'll finally have the plan, the strategy. When God actually makes the strategies, and we just need to ask him, what would you have me do in this moment? E.M. Bounds is one of my favorite authors on prayer, and he was born in the 1800s, wrote a lot in the 1900s. This quote from E.M. is one of my favorite. He said, what the church needs today is not more machinery or better, not new organizations or more and novel methods, but men whom the Holy Ghost can use, men of prayer, men mighty in prayer. 1910. Bounds saw that we were getting real creative and we were making lots of organizations and we were getting lots of machinery in place, but we were powerless because we weren't praying about it first. And that happens right now. That happens right now. Whether it's a political party telling you they're going to save you, or it's a person selling on late night TV, selling some miracle product or cure that's going to save you, it doesn't really matter. It's all the same message. I have figured out this machinery. I have figured out this method, and you've got to get it. And it's only $29.95 per day, per minute. Subscription model, right? That's what it's all saying. It's all the same thing. It's all man-made. It's like you're one of those little rodents on the little wheel. It's all happened before. It's all going to happen again. Ecclesiastes is absolutely right. There's nothing new under the sun. Not one thing new. But here's the trick. Here is the point of access that can be different for you. And that is when you begin in prayer and realize it is God's indwelling within you that changes things. That Jesus told them they weren't going to be alone. Even though he was going to be with the Father, he was like, you're not going to be alone. God has come near. He is here with you. The scriptures in 1 Timothy say it like this. I urge you, first of all, to pray for all people. We looked at this a couple weeks ago. Ask God to help them, intercede on their behalf, and give thanks for them. Prayer is first, Paul says to Timothy here. It's the first priority. Pray first of all. So, some practical opportunities for you. Our prayer team is available to you. We'd love for you to join our prayer team. When you join our team, you get, I think it's 2 weeks of text messages that lead you through different scriptures and tell you about how to pray for people. And then you'll get prayer requests as they come through. We have groups that are coming up in September. These groups are Bible reading groups that pray together for each other's needs and for others. So that's an opportunity. We're going to have a prayer training seminar in October. It'll be a 4-hour event after church on a Sunday morning. So we'll have lunch for you, and we'll do 4 hours of prayer training, so 12 to 4. That's kind of we call them an in-depth seminar or class, and so we'll do prayer training, kind of a focus time, talk about prayer. In 2025, we're working with a group to set up some opportunities for you to go on prayer journeys, which is prayer walking like we're doing at our school or like we do in January here in the New Year prayer that we do outside here. But we'll go to a site where a church has requested help or a mission team has requested people to come pray for them. And so that's opportunities. You can do it on your own. But again, the ongoing prayer opportunities, you can sign up for that in the app. As I mentioned earlier, you push that prayer walk button, and that'll get you started on those details. So the first thing is to pray. Another practical way you can invest is obviously in generosity. Your financial investment makes significant impact in your community where you live, in your backyard, when you give. I think it's interesting. Malachi 3:10, one of the most difficult scriptures for me because it's so interesting in what it says here. At the end. It's the only one I can find that actually says the words. There's 2 other instances where you might infer that God is saying that, but this is the only one where it's explicit, where God says, test me in this. So many times, don't test God, but this one, God himself is saying this. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse so there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, said the Lord of heaven's armies, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. As I mentioned, there's 2 other scriptures that I think you could infer God is inviting you to test him in his faithfulness, but this is the only one that's explicit that says, test me. God is inviting us to test him in this way. That when we are generous, when we echo the heart of God, that he also is generous towards us. Now, that's really interesting to me. I think that is a challenge, and I think it puts it right in front of us. So, giving opportunities in a practical way. You can give an offering. Of course, we have an offering. You can give in person. You can give online. Our Do Good project that's coming up in September will partner us with a couple of local nonprofits where 100% of what we give during the Do Good campaign will go into our community, so you can do good there. Our Christmas offering every year, we talk about different projects that we work through at Coffee Creek. Be open and prayerful about opportunities that come up in front of you. If you want to give here, as we talked about this morning, you can give online, you can give in person, or by mail. But just be open to, what God might bring in front of you. It might be a coworker. It might be a neighbor. It might be a way, even in your own family, to be generous. So be open to opportunities like that. The third and final one is this, time. And this is the hardest one, really. This is harder than prayer, because prayer is easy and free and quick. Money can be regenerated. You can go make more money or sell something. Time, we can't make any more of that. When you give time, that is a gift that means a lot because you've given a portion of yourself in that way. And so using your talents, using how God's gifted you uniquely, giving your time and volunteering is enormous. 1 Peter says it like this: God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. What would it look like for you to section out some time, maybe on a regular basis? Maybe it's monthly, maybe it's weekly, maybe it's every other week, whatever that looks like for you. What would it be like for you to set aside some time and to say, yeah, I'm going to invest that right here in this community of people to improve it and make it even better, to make its reach deeper and wider, so that new people will come to know Jesus, and those that are here will be enriched and be able to go closer to the heart of Jesus. So opportunities like that, like we'll start talking about next week, the next gen opportunities, as I mentioned. We feed the homeless. Today we had a great group out there. I think they said about 100 is what we fed today, downtown Oklahoma City. Every month, the first Sunday of the month, you can go down there and help out with that, or you can give towards that. Guest services and our Sunday crew, the folks that made this possible today, did all of our work on that. There's opportunities there. There's opportunities like opening the door, getting snacks ready. You can lead a group, one of these Bible reading groups that start in September. There's other unique opportunities that come out throughout the year. If you're interested in taking your next step, the app is the great place today. There's a button that says take your next step. What that will do is send it to me and says, hey, someone's interested in taking their next step. And I will send you an email with some options, and then I'll follow up with you and say, hey, I want to help you take your next step. That's like, people always wonder, like, what does the pastor do throughout the week? Well, a big part of it is getting ready for this, but the second greatest part of that is helping people take their next step. And so I want to be like your concierge of spiritual growth and development. I want to help you. What does that look like for you? How do you learn? We've just developed a new tool that I can go through with you that helps you look at the different options that we have available and maybe think through, am I an auditory learner? Am I a verbal learner? Do I learn by doing, or do I learn by sitting and taking notes? Do I learn by reading on my own, or am I better, in a classroom environment? We'll talk about how all that works, and we'll look at those different options with you. So if you're ready to take your next step, let me know, and I would like to help you out. So again, the big idea for today is this, that true wealth isn't measured by what we possess, but instead by how we use what we have. Fear and inaction led the servant. That was the third one. That was the one that did not turn out well for. My prayer for you is that you will hear this strong warning from the Bible, strong warning from Jesus' parable against complacency, and not be complacent. And realize there's a lot of opportunities in front of you to take your next step.